Gong for Hong Kong. Last Sunday, a week ago today, on the streets of Manchester and on the grounds of the Chinese Communist Party, I don't say China's, I say the Chinese Communist Party's consulate, we saw the true character and nature of the Chinese Communist Party on full display. We saw the so-called Consul General himself and several of his consular staff, so-called diplomats, firstly destroying the protesters' banners and signs and placards in a peaceful protest. Then we saw them beating up peaceful protesters on the street of Manchester. And then we saw them drag in Mr. Bob Chan, who I had the privilege of meeting a few days later, and severely beating him on the grounds of the Consulate General. This behavior is absolutely unacceptable and outrageous. It is criminal. And it shows, for anyone who did not already know the nature of the Chinese Communist Party, for anyone who had not been following what's been happening in Hong Kong in recent years, for anyone who has not been paying attention to the genocide of the Uyghurs, for anyone who was not aware of the atrocities in Tibet, for anyone who did not know already about the persecution of Christians, the persecution of Falun Gong, the persecution of lawyers, the persecution of bloggers and dissidents in China, for anyone who had not been paying attention to those crimes of the Chinese Communist Party over many years, last Sunday must have been a wake-up call, because we saw on full display before our very eyes the inhumanity, the brutality, the barbarity, the criminality of the Chinese Communist Party regime. And let's not think that what the Consul General and his thugs did last Sunday was some isolated incident, that it was some rare occasion. Okay, maybe we haven't seen diplomats behave that way before, but this was clearly typical of the mentality of the Chinese Communist Party regime. And of course it happened on the first day of the 20th Party Congress, and clearly they were trying to prove their loyalty to Xi Jinping. But we must not let that criminal incident last Sunday go unanswered. We cannot let those so-called diplomats hide behind diplomatic immunity, and we must not allow them to get away with what they've done with impunity. Over the last week, since last Sunday, we in Hong Kong Watch, together with our friends in IPAC and our friends in other organizations, have been doing everything we can to shine a light and to put pressure on the British government to respond to what happened last Sunday. There have been, as many of you will know, actually 4 occasions in Parliament, where the incident last Sunday has been raised. There were 2 urgent questions, there was 1 point of order that Sir Ian Duncan Smith raised, and there was a question in the House of Lords. And our patron Lord Alton spoke eloquently in that debate. 4 times it's been raised in Parliament. And every time parliamentarians, and we ourselves in Hong Kong Watch, have been urging the government to ensure that justice is done. What does that mean? Well, okay, there is a police inquiry going on, but it should not take too long for the police to establish the facts that we already know, that we've all seen in the footage and photographs on social media. So it should not take long for the police to conclude their investigation, and the government should not hide behind the police inquiry, because we also all know that even if the police wanted to prosecute, with the diplomatic immunity that the so-called diplomats have, unless China lifts that diplomatic immunity, they cannot be prosecuted. And of course China is not going to do that. So there is no reason for any further delay. It has been 1 week. We've been demanding throughout the week that the government act, and we repeat our demand that tomorrow, ideally today, but today's Sunday, but tomorrow morning, the government should immediately declare the Consul General and everybody from the consulate involved in that incident persona non grata. And they should be expelled immediately from this country. We do not want them here. We don't want criminals and thugs posing as diplomats in our country, and they must leave immediately. But let us also not think that that would be enough. Because what happened in Manchester, as I said, shines a light on the nature of the Chinese Communist Party regime, and therefore expelling those diplomats involved in that incident is an important step, but it should be the beginning of a complete re-evaluation of this country's relationship with China. Not with the people of China, but with the regime in Beijing. So we should, the government, whoever is the government next week, the new Prime Minister, should completely review our China policy, should diversify our supply chains, should impose sanctions. We have imposed a few token sanctions on officials responsible for the genocide against the Uyghurs, but it's nowhere near enough. We need more sanctions against those responsible for the genocide of the Uyghurs. We need sanctions against those responsible for destroying Hong Kong's freedoms. We need sanctions against those responsible for the surveillance state and the atrocities in Tibet. We need to hold every perpetrator of atrocity crimes responsible. And there's one last thing I want to say. I think this government and this country has done a reasonably good job at welcoming Hong Kongers to the UK. We worked hard in Hong Kong Watch for the BNO scheme to advocate for it. And I'm proud that the UK established the BNO scheme and provided a lifeline for so many Hong Kongers. And I think hopefully most of you feel welcome here. But you also need to feel safe here. You need to feel that the new freedom that you have in this country can be exercised peacefully and without danger to you. And so we all need to work, and we need to urge the government to do more, to hold those responsible, not just for the Manchester incident, but for intimidation and harassment wherever it happens, accountable, and to ensure that you all and every Hong Konger in this country feels safe. And we in Hong Kong Watch will not rest until the Consul General and his thugs are expelled, until everyone involved is held accountable, until Hong Kongers in this country can feel at every opportunity, not just the freedom, but the safety to do what we're doing now, to protest, to speak our mind, to exercise our right to freedom of protest, and to do so with security and peace. Thank you very much. Guang Fu Kong Gong.